everybody. Thanks so much for coming tonight. It's such a beautiful night, and there's so many pleasant things we could be doing, running and frolicking in the field. But it's so important to be here, and I just want to thank you. I really do want to thank you for coming. I also want to thank the team of Quench people. They're a team of grassroots people from around our area that we've just come together to make this event happen. And also John, the pastor of the church, letting us have this space and helping us with broadcasting the movies. And I want to thank John. And also Jim Walsh is here, and he's going to speak about the effects of hydrofracking waste in New Jersey. And he is the regional director for Food and Water Watch, and he has 10 years of experience working in local national movements to empower communities to work for social, environmental, and economic justice. We all need clean air and clean water. You know, everybody, Democrats, Republicans, teachers, farmers, businessmen, scientists, everybody, we all need clean water. And I just want to say that it feels like the only way we can do this is with grassroots. Just town to town, community by community, citizen by citizen. And then the more we start talking about it and it becomes a household word, the louder our voices will get, and the more other people will start knowing what's happening, what's going on in New Jersey. That's what we're here for, is education and awareness. And with education and awareness, we can take action. You know, we can write to legislators, senators, we can write editorials, and just talk and make it happen, you know. So anyway, the agenda is just, we're going to watch a 19-minute movie which is loaded with facts, and it will get you to really understand and feel what hydrofracking is, and the waste, and that aspect of it that is allowed to come to New Jersey right now. After that, Jim will be speaking about the effects, and then after that, we are going to watch Rick Sawyer. He was supposed to be here. Rick Sawyer worked on a rig in the hydrofracking industry, and he unfortunately is too ill to drive here from Pennsylvania. It's a 6-hour drive. He left the industry about a year ago. He felt like there were no regulations and it was too dangerous to work there. And now he and his friends are suffering from many illnesses. So instead of him being here in person, we actually have a video of him speaking to citizens in Elmira, New York. And it's very interesting. It's the inside scoop. It's at Ground Zero, and it's a man who is so for hydrofracking and worked there, and so it's a very interesting speech that he gave to us. After that, we're going to pick out a number, and whoever has the number, lucky person, gets two tickets, or actually it's a $100 gift certificate to the Two River Theater. And so good luck. And thank you for coming.
TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
The risks of natural gas development in the Marcellus Shale, from toxic chemicals in drinking water to unregulated dumping of potentially radioactive waste. Are the health consequences worth the economic benefits? Coming up on Earth Focus. It's called Marcellus Shale, and it contains enough natural gas to supply all U.S. gas needs for 14 years. But gas development here can be a catastrophe in the making. Toxic chemicals and methane gas seep into drinking water. And now, experts fear something worse: radioactive radium in waste products. The gas business may be booming, but at what price for people? Britain's Ecologist TV explores the social and ecological consequences of gas extraction in the Marcellus Shale in this original investigative report.
This is Bradford County, northeastern Pennsylvania. This previously quiet corner of America is now at the center of a rush for natural gas, extracted through a new drilling technology called hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking. But as the ecologists discovered, fracking is a high-risk process that threatens to both destroy the environment and direct lives.
Makes me mad. Makes me very mad. Because my life is over without my water.
There was just like this red, nasty water just coming, just oozing out the side of the mountain, just the side of the hill.
And now hydraulic fracturing is heading for Europe. The UK, Poland, France and Germany are all next in the frack firing line. This is a picture postcard part of America. But beneath these rolling hills lies a seam of gas-rich rock called Marcellus Shale. But the shale gas is far from easily accessible.
The process itself is that you drill down a few thousand feet into a layer of very dense shale, turn the well horizontally, go out, and perform some other operations. Eventually you set off charges that blow holes in the pipe, and then you fill up the pipe with a liquid, and the intent is basically to get sand back in the cracks of the rock to hold it across the gas will flow.
Gas drilling sites, or frack pads as they are known, have begun to appear all over the countryside, but these are just a tip of the iceberg. Professor Tony Ingraffia is one of the world's leading pioneers of fracture mechanics.
The fact is that Pennsylvania is 3 years into a 30-year large-scale industrial development. There are fewer than 2,000 Marcellus wells in Pennsylvania right now, but they're drilling them at the rate of 4 to 5 per day, and the rate at which they're being drilled is increasing. The industry intends to drill between 3,000 and 5,000 wells per year for the next 30 years in Pennsylvania, and if they get their way, in New York.
With many farmers struggling to remain profitable, the large royalty payments offered for land means that many are readily selling off their mineral rights. For others, there is also the promise of new jobs. And on a national level, it is argued that shale gas is a step towards energy independence. But in the rush to drill, concerns about the potential risks of fracking are being swept aside.
When I first heard about shale drilling, it sounded like a pretty good idea. The thing that really got me interested and concerned was I found out that under the proposed regulations in New York State, you could drill a gas well 150 feet from this river or the lake that feeds it, which is the water source for this village. And that's just insane.
One of the first problems observed in communities close to intensive fracking sites has been the contamination of domestic water supplies. The ecologist spoke to families who have been unable to drink water from the town since the gas companies started fracking on land close to their homes.
And I didn't tell Ronnie anything about it until probably a couple days later, because it got worse. I thought maybe this will go away. I don't know what it is, but it didn't. And I said to him, I said, you know, we have a problem with our water. Water is a commodity. You might not think it is when you have it and it's good, but when you lose it, it's gone. You'll never get it back. Like we would take a glass of water out of a tap and it would have like an oil base on top. You could smell it. It would smell like diesel fuel or some kind of oil thing.
You know, I used to go to my sink and get a glass of water. I can't do that. I have to put lotion on my hands 3 times a day for using the water. Even wash my dishes or wash my clothes.
Meanwhile, increased levels of methane gas in water supplies have been reported in areas of intensive drilling.
This is the water that's in my well, and it's supposedly I'm supposed to be drinking it.
One of the key problems with the fracking process is its reliance upon huge volumes of water combined with an array of harmful chemicals. Carolyn Knapp is an organic farmer.
I don't believe that they should be allowed to put chemicals into my ground, chemicals that are not allowed by my certification to be put in the ground, chemicals that I feel can do harm to my family, to the people around me, and I feel violated.
None of those chemicals are toxic. Methanol, hydrochloric acid, ethylene, glycol. It's about 0.5% of the fracking fluid is a chemical, or is it really a cocktail chemical? And but think of the math on that. That means that's 5,000 gallons of the well is chemicals, or toxic chemicals that goes in. So if there's 8 wells at the pad site, that's 40,000 gallons of toxic chemicals.
And we're losing farms far too quickly as it is, and to have one more circumstance that makes us lose the farms quicker is all the quicker that they'll be gone. There will be no more small family farms.
The rush for gas has had other effects on the local community. Small towns have become clogged with gas industry trucks.
I have to say, the days of having a nice conversation sitting out in front of the diner are long gone. Main Street's noisier and louder now than ever as a result of the large trucks that the industry requires. They run nonstop, 24 hours a day through town, and yeah, the noise is louder than ever.
Whilst the increase in traffic represents an inconvenience for local people, the high volume of trucks point to far more serious problems.
Once the chemicals are injected and the fracturing process is complete, a large percentage of that fluid comes back up. So we have purposely polluted large quantities of fresh water with chemicals that do not belong in the human environment. And now we have the responsibility, the industry and the landowners have the responsibility to dispose of them properly. But we're talking enormous quantities.
Whereas energy-rich Texas has over 11,000 disposal wells, the temperate geography of Pennsylvania means that only a few exist, hardly enough to cater for the thousands of wells planned in coming years. But the safe disposal of frac fluid is not the only concern.
The amount of fluid that's running around out there, literally, in tanker trucks, thousands of tanker trucks, is such that one tanker truck going off the road with fracking chemicals into a river would pretty much wipe it out. This is like taking that rough and tumble, highly industrialized activity and plopping it right down in the crosswalks. Maybe not such a good idea.
Truman Burnett's retirement dream has been destroyed after a gas industry truck spilled a small amount of polluted frac water onto his property.
We've had some health problems, and this was her recovery area, and we had a little bit of heaven. The only thing you heard at nighttime here was your heartbeat. Now it's just totally devastating. The water dumped out, down off their pad, down across my land, into my pond, through the pond and into the wetland here alongside. What it did, it killed the pond, it killed the fish, killed everything in the pond. No frogs, no turtles, nothing. Our drinking water in our house has high concentrations of lead. They recommended it, or they told us not to drink it, don't bathe in it. From our heaven, now it's turned into our hell.
The estimate of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Preservation is one serious environmental concern for every 150 wells drilled to date. You do the math. We're talking hundreds of thousands of wells. We're doing hundreds or thousands of spills. That's called cumulative impact. It goes to the heart of your question. Why are you not seeing all these things yet? because the cumulative impact is accumulated. Come back in 10 years.
The ecologist met with an ex-gas industry employee who described a spill on a site that he worked at.
Some of the sites are well regulated, yeah, with DEP and OSHA and stuff like that, where they're right on and stuff, yeah, they're well regulated. But the rest of the 95% of them, where they're not gonna go out to the site and look at them, no. No, they're not well regulated. Some of them are real bad. I've seen chemicals come out of the side, literally the side. It looked like the mountain was bleeding. It looks like a plateau. They had the pad here, and they had like a barrier fence around it. And there was just like this red, nasty water just coming, just oozing out the side of the mountain, just the side of the hill. So they're not doing something right.
But a toxic cocktail of chemicals is not the only worrying component in frack wastewater. Critics argue it could contain far more dangerous substances.
These shale deposits are rich in radium, radium-226. The level of radium in the Marcellus is about 267 times the safe disposed amount, meaning that it'll kill you. So there's anecdotal evidence that these frac fluids will leach uranium out of these shale deposits. There's also radon in these shale deposits. So in addition to the fracking fluid, which we know is toxic, the frac flowback leaches radium out of the shale. The radium is carcinogenic, and that's something that's being introduced to the surface in a spill that wasn't there before.
As the profile of the potential dangers of hydraulic fracturing grows, both public and experts are becoming increasingly concerned by the rapid expansion of fracking. But the gas industry have hit back with expensive ads, PR campaigns, and high-level lobbying.
It's the cost benefit of BS, of PR, of ads, and payoffs to politicians. It is extraordinary. The return on investment of paying off a politician, running an ad, discrediting critics, it's one of the best investments that the industry can make.
Although they declined an opportunity to speak on camera, a spokesperson for the Marcellus Shale Coalition, which represents the gas industry, told the ecologist that gas extracted from fracking is both safe and a panacea for America, offering a fuel that is both a cleaner and a more secure choice than relying on foreign energy supplies. But Professor Ingrafia disagrees.
Because in general, in the uses framework, oil and gas are not interchangeable. Petroleum is largely used for transportation. Natural gas is largely used for heating and for industrial activity. So until you can show me a plan as part of a national energy plan to transform our transportation system in the United States to one that uses natural gas, right, that argument is specious. Natural gas burns cleaner than any other fossil fuel, but it is not cleaner in its life cycle. Studies that are being done at Cornell University right now that are going to be released soon in peer-reviewed journals will show conclusively that the life cycle cost in terms of carbon dioxide emission and methane emission from the development of gas from unconventional sources like shale is at least as dirty as coal.
Professor Ingrafia is also concerned about unregulated fracturing practices spreading around the world.
Not only do we now have a technology that has exceeded our regulatory capacity, we have a government saying something that's ahead of the technology. So I'm really concerned about people in Europe, India, Asia, Africa, that they're going to jump into this again too soon without understanding completely what the implications of this use of technology are on environment and human health.
But despite the concerns of experts from across the spectrum, fracking in Pennsylvania is set to continue. Ralph Gisberg, a campaigner against the gas industry, offers a sober assessment.
You gotta realize the vast majority of people here think it's wonderful. They think they'll be jobs, they think they'll be able to keep their families here, they'll be able to pay for education. But we find, as you've seen, you talk to people, that all is good on paper, but when things happen that ruin the value of your property, ruin the health of your family, and that all goes out the window.
With hydraulic fracturing set to expand across Europe in the coming years, how governments respond to this new technology will be crucial. But the lure of a new domestic energy source and the promise of jobs in regions starved of investment may prove too powerful a combination to oppose.
potential benefits need to be balanced against acceptable risk. For that, you need facts, like what's really in the 5 million gallons of fluid, including the 75,000 gallons of chemicals used to frack a single well. Under the Bush administration's Energy Policy Act of 2005, companies didn't have to tell you. However, in September 2010, 8 companies responded to an EPA request for information. It took a subpoena to get Halliburton, the company that pioneered fracking, to respond. Fracking chemicals are linked to bone, liver, and breast cancers, gastrointestinal, circulatory, respiratory, developmental, as well as brain and nervous system disorders. And they are in frack waste and may find their way into drinking water and air. And it gets worse. Today, waste from Pennsylvania gas wells, waste that may also contain unacceptable levels of radium, is routinely dumped across state lines into landfills in New York, Ohio, and West Virginia. New York does not require testing waste for radioactivity prior to dumping or treatment. So drill cuttings from Pennsylvania have been dumped in New York's Chemung and other counties since 2009, and liquid waste is shipped to treatment plants in Auburn and Watertown, New York. It is ironic that New York State, the first in the nation to put a temporary hold on fracking pending a safety review, nevertheless allows other states to dump frack waste within its boundaries. How radioactive is this waste? Experts are calling for testing and are concerned about the contamination of the drinking supply of major population centers, including New York City. With a gas production boom underway in the Marcellus Shale, plans for some 400,000 wells in the coming decades, the cumulative impact of dumping potential lethal waste without adequate oversight is a catastrophe waiting to happen.
Can people in the back hear me? Yeah. All right, I'm going to put this down. If I start drifting off, let me know. So they told me I need to get everybody out of here by 11 o'clock tonight. My name is Jim Walsh. I'm a New Jersey Director for Food and Water Watch. Diane thanked a lot of people here tonight, but I'd really like to give Diane a round of applause. And thank you all for giving your evening to come here and learn about this important issue. I hope that you don't just learn about this, but you take this information and you act upon it. Because we're gonna change the world when people start taking this information and doing something about it. Shaking your fist at the TV will no longer be enough. And so, I feel like this movie really did a great job of talking about a lot of the dangers of fracking. And so I'm going to actually talk first about the kind of what's going on in the media and what's happening, because I think it's important to discuss that. People have probably heard a lot of things in the media. What are some of the things that people hear about in the media when they hear about fracking? Clean energy, and then you have people like me saying, no, it's dirty energy, right? And then you have game changer, or like game ender. And so you have this dynamic where there's this back and forth that's happening around this, it's just a few bad actors, right? You do it responsibly, we'll be okay. Everybody just needs to follow the rules. There are rules. There are rules. It's very, very good. Thank you. That's great. And I think one of the things that for this issue that's really come to my attention, this discussion of safety, is fracking safe or not? And what I've come to realize in the course of this campaign is something we don't think about a lot, but safety is subjective. You know, when you're willing, sir, to cross a busy intersection, and when you'd be willing to cross a busy intersection and feel safe, it would be two entirely different things. In terms of safety, it's a very, subjective thing. When I think about the aspects of fracking not being subjective, I look at the fact that it's exempt from federal standards that are meant to protect public health and the environment. When I think of an objective standard for fracking, I can't think of a better objective standard than federal laws that our democracy has helped to create. As flawed as you may believe it is, there's really no better standard for safety than that we can say is objectively a standard of safety. Yet the fracking industry has been able to exempt themselves from a number of federal laws that are meant to protect public health and the environment. And so what I ask the industry is, if fracking is so safe, why did your industry fight to become exempt from these standards and continue to fight to stay exempt from these standards? What you're doing is so safe. And I got a legislator to ask that during a hearing in Trenton. And you know what the response from the industry was? We believe that current regulations are adequate to protect public health and the environment. That's right. And that's the company line. And they're exempt from very important laws meant to protect the public health and the environment. I wanted to share this because I want to talk about something that the industry does in terms of fracking and the conversations that they have. And they're very careful with the words that they choose. And they will say fracking has never contaminated drinking water. And the industry defines fracking as exploding something underground. That's only fracking. When we're talking about fracking, we're talking about the whole process of oil and gas drilling from start to finish. They'll say fracking doesn't cause climate change. Causing those explosions underground might not. But as you heard Dr. Graffia talk about, that study from Cornell came out. One of the things they documented in that is that methane, the chief component of natural gas, is actually has 20 times more heat trapping capacity than CO2 does. So, it's important to look at what they're talking about. So we've been doing fracking for years, and there's truth to that. North Carolina was actually the first state in the country to ban fracking. They did it 100 years ago. And what they were doing in North Carolina was drilling holes to get oil out and throwing sticks of dynamite down the holes. And so they have been fracking for a long time. But what they're doing now is very different. And they're taking really what amounts to 4 technologies and using those technologies to extract natural gas in a very different and new way. So this is the conventional gas wells we see that drill down into sandstone deposits primarily, where the gas is not as tightly packed as it would be in the shale deposits, which are very tightly packed and require this new technique. And so you think about this three-dimensionally, you drill down into a sandstone deposit, you can start extracting gas. You may have to do one explosion under there, but you can essentially get into that and start extracting gas. What they're doing now in the Utica Shale in Ohio, and by the way, they also, so the the industry being very careful about those words, and we'll talk a little about this later, is they say, we don't have any Marcellus Shale in New Jersey. It's true, we don't. We have Mazoic Shale and Utica Shale in New Jersey. And I'll show you a little bit where that is, but they're very careful in the words they choose. Because we have shale in New Jersey that can be fracked, and they just haven't done it yet. We'll talk a little about the economics and why that hasn't happened. But what they're doing is really combining 4 technologies. The directional horizontal drilling, where they're actually drilling down vertically and then turning the well horizontally. High volume, they're using literally 10 to 100 times the amount of fluid. Most wells use anywhere between 3 and 7 million gallons of water per well. And each well can be fracked multiple times. So each time they're doing it, it's another 3 to 7 million gallons of water, another thousands of gallons of toxic chemicals that are being added to that. In Michigan, they just started fracking wells that are actually using over 20 million gallons of water in Michigan for every well that's being fracked. So we're talking about issues where we have droughts and water shortages and things like that. It becomes a real issue. Slick water, the use of these chemicals. Because they're drilling down so deep and working to get in these shale deposits, they actually have to use chemicals to prohibit bacterial growth. They have to use chemicals to soften rock formations they're working to get through. So they're using different chemicals that they had never used before in the drilling process in multiple well pads. And look at this from a three-dimensional standpoint. You can think about this extending out this way, right? And so in order to get at this shale, you just can't drill one horizontal well this way. You need to drill one this way, and one this way, and one this way, and one this way, and one this way. So they're fracking these wells multiple times. And so really, when we talk about fracking and what's happening now, it's very different than what they were doing in North Carolina 100 years ago. Very different than what the industry was doing to extract gas in the 80s and 90s. This is it's taking these four technologies and combining them together in a new way. With, as the gentleman in the back reminds us, is not being regulated, exempt from a lot of regulations. These are the shale plays that we knew about a few years ago in the lower United States. Last June, the U.S. Geological Survey, and this is actually, you can see here, this is in the blue here is the Marcellus Shale. The Utica Shale, you can see, covers a little bit of New Jersey here. In this map, and this next picture will show it a little bit better for you. These are New Jersey shale plays. The pink and purple and blue are that Utica Shale deposit. This area here wasn't on that map. That, it was, we knew that shale was there. The U.S. Geological Survey assessed that shale in the Newark Basin, is what it's referred to as. They assessed the South Newark Basin, which is that red section there. And in assessing that, they found that there's could be upwards of 1.6 trillion cubic feet of gas in that, just the southern Newark Basin. They haven't assessed the North Newark Basin yet. And the North Newark Basin, you can see this basically extends just north of Princeton, up through Middlesex County, New Brunswick, Essex, Newark, up into Hoboken, Patterson, up into Rockland County, New York, under the Delaware River, and into parts of Pennsylvania. Incidentally, Pennsylvania, which is basically the Wild West of fracking after this information came out, the Pennsylvania legislature and Governor Corbett signed a bill that actually prevents fracking from happening in that shale deposit there. And so right now in Pennsylvania, the industry is prohibited from doing that under Pennsylvania law. There's a body called the Delaware River Basin Commission, which is responsible for protecting the watershed of the Delaware River, which actually right now does not allow fracking to go out in that watershed. And believe me, the industry is trying really hard to get into that. Into that area. There was a massive grassroots effort about 2 years ago to stop those wells from going into the ground. And that provides about 17 million people in the region with drinking water. It comes from the Delaware River. So New Jersey does not have Utica Shale, but we have trillions of cubic feet of gas in the state. What is in the South Newark Basin is essentially about enough to give New Jersey gas for about a year and a half, at most. It could be less. And the question comes out is, will they frack New Jersey? And so what I want to talk about, the crux of what I want to talk about now, is let's say that we're successful at banning fracking in New Jersey, and the New Jersey legislature has passed legislation to prohibit fracking in the state, and Governor Christie vetoed that legislation in favor of a one-year moratorium that expires in January. The legislature then passed a bill, and we'll talk a little bit about fracking waste. They passed a bill to prohibit fracking waste dumping in the state. And the governor vetoed that legislation. And if we're looking at New Jersey and what we're doing, these are some of the real impacts that it will have on the state. Water management, jobs, the economy, infrastructure, global warming, and energy independence. And so let's talk about this, and we'll talk a little bit about the wastewater here and what's going on in that. I'll talk a little bit about the politics that are happening right now. Why the people in this room, you guys are extremely important in the effort in New Jersey and really across the country to stop this practice from destroying our communities, and I'll tell you why. But first, I'm going to talk about the water management. Trillions of gallons of water are being used in this process. Trillions of gallons of water are being used across the country. And millions of gallons are going to be used in this process. Tremendous amounts of water. Last year, the Colorado River auction, they auctioned off water here from the Colorado River, the highest bidder. Last year, the gas and oil industry outbid farmers for water in Colorado. Do you remember we were having a drought and our food prices were going up? That was being further exacerbated by gas drilling. And that impacts all of us here. It impacts people around the country because of these things. So even if they don't frack a single well in New Jersey, this is having an impact on us. Injection wells. We don't have any injection wells here in New Jersey where they can actually do this. We don't have the geological space for that. But in other states, these injection wells are actually causing earthquakes. Water treatment. This is where New Jersey is in the crosshairs. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has documented 3 shipments of fracking waste coming in New Jersey. One in Carteret, one in Kearney, and one in Elizabeth. It was uncovered by a newspaper in Delaware that an additional shipment of partially treated fracking waste was shipped to the deep water facility that DuPont runs in South Jersey and then discharged to the Delaware River. After we found out this was happening, the New Jersey legislature immediately held a hearing on this and moved legislation to ban this practice in the state. And it wasn't just because it was the right news, because there's a lot of people screaming about this and writing letters and making phone calls and signing petitions and getting other people to sign petitions to put a stop to this. It didn't just happen because it's right. But that happened, they moved this legislation that's then vetoed by the governor. We've talked about the waste issue here in the state. Since that action has happened, we haven't seen any documented cases of fracking waste coming into the state from Pennsylvania's DEP. But as I said before, it took a newspaper in Delaware to find a shipment that was going down for partially treated fracking waste to a facility in South Jersey. So we can't be for sure that the wastewater isn't coming into the state, but the solid drill cuttings aren't coming into the state. We're in a state that has significant water problems and challenges. We have a high pollution burden already. This movie talked tremendously about radioactive waste. And for the governor to veto that legislation to me is unconscionable. And his rationale for it was very simply, it's not New Jersey's business. And so we've been in an effort to build support for an override of the governor's veto. And a lot of the legislators who voted to ban fracking waste dumping in the state are now on the fence about whether or not they want to override the governor's veto. And we're here tonight, and we've been doing work and organizing this area because a lot of the Republican legislators who were able to vote their conscience and listen to their constituents are getting a lot of pressure from the front office to not vote to override the governor's veto and to put his election for president ahead of the interest of their constituents. And so it's really important that all of you take time to call them and contact them about this. You guys will see red pieces of paper that you came in that are the phone numbers for Assemblyman O'Scanlan and Assemblyman Hanlon. There are 2 very important voices in this. I hope that all of you call their offices tomorrow and tell them you support a ban on fracking waste dumping. You ask them to stand up for the gas and oil industry and do what's right for their constituents and put politics aside. If all of the Republican legislators in the state vote to override the governor's veto, we will ban fracking waste in the state, if the people who voted for it the first time. If 2 of them flip-flop, we won't do it. So we need these 2 and all the rest of them to do it, and they should do it. They did it the first time, and we found out more problems about this waste since this has come out, and more problems with this. So let's say we ban fracking waste. Is anybody here an investor? Few people. No, so there's investors. This is actually really important for the economics of this, and something I want people to think about. How the industry right now is actually making about 25 cents on the dollar for what it costs to frack a well. And so they're not making money on the drilling. And how a lot of these companies are actually making money is they're actually buying up a lot of leases, aggregating those leases, and then selling them into a seconds market. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Rousing bubble, right? So one of the things that we're finding from these fracking wells is they're actually not as productive as the industry thought they would be. Because what's happening is when you initially frack a well, you have a lot more pressure and the gas flows a lot faster. But over time, the pressure dissipates and less gas going into the plants. We're actually not getting as much gas out of these wells as the industry thought. In certain areas, in certain pockets, tend to have more gas, and certain areas and pockets tend to have less gas. And so we're very concerned from an economic point of view that we could be setting our country up for another massive bubble that could pop when these investors who are buying essentially these mortgages on these aggregated leases, expecting to be paid back from future gas revenues, may not see that revenue coming back to them. And so for those of you who are investing, it might be a good time to consider pulling yourself out of gas, and I don't think that would be insider trading to do that. The boom and bust is also important. You know, the industry likes to talk about all the jobs they're creating in other areas. These are extractive industries. They create ghost towns at the end of the day. There's a lot of work that goes into setting up the projects and the operations, but long run, those jobs are gone. And the communities where these jobs are being set up and created have to create infrastructure to support those jobs. They have to build roads to support the trucks. They have to build schools to support the workers' kids. After those jobs are gone, you don't have that tax base anymore to support that. And we all know what property taxes are doing in New Jersey. And so we're very concerned about the boom and bust cycle. And we're also concerned about the impacts on other jobs and other industries. So when they start fracking in places that are fishing, hunting, recreational areas, you lose value in those industries. You put businesses that support those long-standing recreational activities out of business. The industry never talks about the people that are going out of business through this. The infrastructure that comes along with this is really important to talk about and discuss. I don't know why it's locked. Computer malfunction. All right. Good thing I brought a paper copy. I can pass this around. So the infrastructure is really important. I'll actually have to hold up pictures now for you. For those of you watching on video, I'm sorry you're not going to have to get to see the update. But pipelines. There are pipelines being built. Yeah, this is the people who fix it. Thank you to the youth. There's pipeline infrastructure that's being built across the state. There's a number of pipelines, 42, 36-inch pipelines being built across the state to bring gas from Pennsylvania into New Jersey markets. And there's also proposals and plans to take liquefied natural gas facilities to basically put this gas on ships and move it overseas. We have 25% of the capacity of gas that's being produced in this country has already been approved for export. And this is really important because the industry likes to say we have 100 years of gas in this country. So these are the projects that we're looking at in New Jersey: gas-fired power plants, pipelines, natural gas acts creating transportation infrastructure. There's actually just something in the paper about Monmouth County getting 3 or 4 new compressed natural gas vehicle stations for people to fill up natural gas cars, which is also, frankly, really relevant because of the radon issue. We know the radon's coming up with the fracking waste. What makes us believe that radon, which is a gas, would not also be included in that gas that's flowing down these pipes? And we're very concerned about the radon burden that we could be bringing into our kitchen sink, or into our kitchen stoves, into our hot water heaters. And homes are more insulated now than they were ever. Is anybody here at their home otherwise? You got that thing locked up tight. So the things that are coming in are getting out a lot slower than they used to get out. And we already have radon issues and problems here. But we're bringing all this infrastructure in, this is a pipeline project that was being discussed. Thank you. And that was being planned. I believe this is a pipeline in Pennsylvania. Somebody took a picture of. So there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure. And something that's really important for this infrastructure is they're targeting these pipelines for public lands. They're going through the highlands, they're going through the pinelands, they're going through public parks. And one of the reasons the industry does that is because public lands have zero commercial value. So they can lease the land for them for far cheaper than they can private land. So all the money we pay towards green acres, the industry comes in and buys up those leases for that land for pennies on the dollar of what they would have to pay to get it from a private landowner. And what's really important about that is New Jersey's Green Acres program and public land buying program is set up specifically to protect farmland and protect drinking water sources. So they're driving these pipelines through protected farmland and drinking water sources because it's cheaper for them than it is for for them to go through private landowners. So these are impacts. I mean, they don't frack a single well, they don't bring a single bit of fracking waste into the state. We're still dealing with these pipelines because they want to bring the gas to our homes, to our cars, to New York City, and to foreign markets. This is a picture that the, why is this happening? Where's my friend? Thank you. What's your name? Thank you, Lauren. So Lauren is going to put back there. This is this is a picture that was that we got from a public hearing on the pipeline that the Tennessee Gas was building. It doesn't look like much, right? It's like pretty like one line and it goes through there. The next slide is Bradford County, Pennsylvania. This is Bradford County, Pennsylvania. All of these lines you see here are all gas pipelines. Because when they drill these wells, they don't have a bunch of 42-inch pipelines running all over the place. They need to bring the gas from the fracking well to the next fracking well, to the next fracking well, to the next fracking well, to the 42-inch pipeline. So this is littered with pipelines all over the place. Not benign projects at all, in any way, shape, or form. It's massive industrialization. So here's a picture of a fracking well site. Climate change, global warming. I think Dr. Grafia talked about that considerably, the fact that it's greenhouse gas is worse than coal. I think we've all experienced Hurricane Sandy. You know, to me, it's really, I'm personally very concerned that, you know, Governor Christie talks about addressing, you know, rebuilding the shore and protecting it, and won't do anything to address the real impacts of climate change. Because that's how we're going to protect the shores, to start moving towards a renewable energy economy. That's not going to put us in danger of these storms coming up in the future. These are some elevations. I'll just let you do that. Elevations of, you know, like where we'll be impacted based on sea level rises and how far we're going to go. Next one. This is the energy independence. In fact, they're exporting this gas to other countries. This is a little old. This shows that it's anywhere between 4 and 8. It's actually up to about 6 to 8 times as much in Europe and Asian markets. So they can sell the gas a lot more. And this is important too because we as New Jersey residents, as we are spending our tax dollars literally to invest in this gas infrastructure, these power plants and these natural gas cars and things like that, once we hit the international market, we have these LNG facilities set up that we can freely move gas back and forth. We're not going to have the depressed gas prices right now. We have the depressed gas prices because the industry can't get it out of the country. There's a tremendous supply that exists. And so after we're plugged into that, we're going to have these power plants, we're going to have these cars, and we're no longer going to have a cheap energy source. Those prices are going to rise, and hopefully the investors get paid back and the bubble doesn't pop. Great. Next. Where do we go from here? We're in the middle of a very active campaign, as I said, to ban fracking waste and fracking waste treatment in the state. We're also working to get legislation introduced to start monitoring the gas coming in from Pennsylvania for radon risk and to make sure that those gas pipelines get shut down at any point in time. The radon levels rise beyond background levels. We need to create jobs. This is about the future of our country. This is really about where are we going to be in 50 years. Gas, the industry says, is a bridge fuel. Gas is an entirely new infrastructure. It's like Dr. Grafia said, it is not the same infrastructure that we've been existing on. Solar and wind power plug into the electric grid. They don't use pipelines. We're building a transition fuel that has no infrastructure that will be usable for renewable energy sources. And these guys aren't going to give that stuff up at the end of the day, after investing all this money into it. They're not going to, oh yeah, now we have solar, we'll get out of the way. And what's happening with gas right now is actually undercutting the return on investment for individuals and businesses for investing in renewable energy, because they see that I can build a gas heater instead of investing in solar and save more money for my business this quarter, which is essentially what the business model is focused on, right? The next quarter returns. And so we're actually undercutting the markets and the jobs and the renewable energy economy because of natural gas development. And so that's essentially what this is. And, you know, take action is something we need to do. These are two important legislative leaders that we're having people across the state call, because anybody anywhere can call them. Speaker Oliver and Senator Sweeney. They're the ones who need to post these bills for a vote on the override. Posting those bills is important, but because we're here, I gave everybody should have that red piece of paper. Call your legislators tomorrow morning.
Are the numbers?
Yes, yep, they're on there. Call them, tell them that you want them to override the governor's veto of fracking, because that, and because you are literally like in the district. Your votes are extremely important to them. And that's why we're here tonight. That's why we're here to talk to you, to hopefully get you folks involved in this. Diane and Quench have done tremendous organizing to put this event together. I'm sure many of you talked to them at Beams when they were out there tabling and petitioning. Maybe some of you talked to them at other events. I hope you join them. I hope you get involved with them. We have a local group that meets in Monmouth County. Hope you get involved with us. Like it's getting engaged, getting involved with organizations, the change is how we're going to overcome this. It's reaching more neighbors. It's putting together more forums to educate people and bring them into the fold and get them involved. And I hope that some of you who came here tonight not being at all politically involved, maybe leave here signing a petition. And those of you who have signed a petition before, I hope you decide to come to a meeting and join us in something. On the other side of this piece of paper also is an open house that we're having next week. We have fun, celebrate. We're having a Hawaiian cheese party in Rumson. If anybody wants to join us, you're welcome to come to that. We're actually going to have somebody from Open, New Jersey, the Northeast Organic Farming Association, will be talking about the impacts of fracking and our food system. We'll also be talking a little bit about genetically engineered foods and the impacts that that's having on our food system, as well as organic farmers. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. And then just one last thing I want to just let people know, this is a membership brochure. One of the things that Food and Water Watch does organizationally is we don't take money from corporations. We don't take money from the government. That helps us maintain our independence. It's folks like you who help make our work possible, through your funding and support that allows us to be independent. There's been a number of, in the media, I won't smack talk any grassroots organizations, but there's been many reports of organizations who take corporate money from the gas industry and it's compromised their position. And we work very hard to be independent as people who do that to help us do that. So if you guys want to donate money, we'll take it. I don't know if Quench raises money, but you guys should give them money too. No, don't give Quench money, give us money. But no. But thank you. And I think the most important thing is get involved with how you can. Go to those local meetings, get involved. We're going to watch this movie now. I wish that we're not. Okay. I'm sorry. I think I talked too long. I'm sorry. So I guess if people have questions or thoughts or anything. Yes. Yeah.
I have three questions. One's kind of school-minded one, which has to do with what is actually done with the fracking water. You mentioned that they're shipping it across state line. What do they actually do with it?
There's two primary disposal methods for fracking waste. One is injection wells, where they actually will take the waste and actually pump it into the earth to just be forgotten about. That water will never be recovered and never come back. When they frack wells, anywhere between 30 and 60% of the liquids that are pushed down the well actually never come back either. We have no idea where those go.
Right.
And then the remainder of it is taken to various water treatment facilities with various levels of contaminants taken out. In Pennsylvania, they were actually taken to waste and sewage treatment facilities that were essentially made to process food. And we're discharging literally radioactive waste into the stream beds of that state.
So the stuff that quote hypothetically comes from New Jersey, and we know it's not coming from. We don't have really any idea, is it being re-injected or is it?
We don't have injection wells in the state.
Right, so it would go to a treatment plant or?
Yes. And we've also had facilities that are landfills that have actually accepted solid waste.
Okay. So the last question is, and I've been to these events, but I've never really heard anybody talk about this at all. Do you have any idea, or is anybody doing any studies, Rutgers or something like that, maybe Princeton, that really discusses the potential of this for screwing up the Pinelands Aquifer? I mean, the Pinelands Aquifer is pretty, the reason the Pinelands Preservation Area exists, it's the biggest freshwater aquifer in the United States.
Yeah. There's two threats the Pineland Aquifer has to this, which are really important. We don't have, none of the shale deposits actually go over the Pine Hills aquifer, so there could be another layer of shale down thousands of more feet that nobody's figured out yet. But there's two major concerns. One is there's a company that's actively testing sand from the Pinelands to use in the fracking process. So they could be doing sand mining from the Pinelands. And secondly is the Board of Public Utilities right now is evaluating a pipeline that will run through the pipeline, the Pinelands to hook up the BL England coal plant to transition to gas.
What was the point of the preservation?
And they're going through the Highlands as well, which is also an important drinking water source for North Jersey. Yes?
That's my question. We have these preservation areas and the green lines and all that stuff. How are they allowed to put pipes into those areas?
There are loopholes and exemptions essentially. Has anybody ever seen a wetlands, like remediation project, like this wetlands is restored?
Yeah.
So there's like this, it's not funny, but there's this joke, is when you see a wetland being restored, what you're actually watching is a wetland being destroyed. Because the reason those wetlands are being restored is because somebody leveled the wetland for a housing project or a pipeline or something else, and as part of their mitigation plan, have to build a new wetland someplace else. And with a basic understanding of ecosystems and geology, it doesn't work that way. You just can't take this wetland and move it over there and expect it to serve the same ecological and environmental purposes it served before. And so there's also a body called the New Jersey State House Commission, which is responsible for overseeing the stewardship of these public lands in terms of leases and things like that. So the State House Commission is an entity that has to vote on all of these land diversion projects that happen. And it's made up of 4 representatives from the governor's office, the governor, who usually has a representative, so he actually has 5 votes, and then 4 legislators, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, 1 from each house. And that body is green-lighted every pipeline project in a landfill. All the governor's representatives vote for it every single time. Usually the Republicans vote for it. Usually have 1 Democrat vote against it, 1 abstaining if you're lucky. So they're basically giving them away right now. The energy bill? For those of you here, she asked me to talk about the energy bill that passed during the Bush administration. And so that was when the Clean Water Act exemptions were passed that prevent the company from disclosing the chemicals that are in fracking fluids. Some of the other exemptions, like the Resource Conservation Recovery Act exemption, is actually something that was done administratively by the Reagan administration in the 80s. That exempts fracking waste, or actually all waste from oil and gas drilling is exempt from federal laws dealing that regulates hazardous waste from those projects. And so the specific exemption you're asking about is Clean Water Act exemption and disclosure. I personally don't believe that any company should be able to be exempted from laws that are meant to protect public health and the environment. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, and there's no reason to allow this company to follow the rules and this company to not. But when I look at fracking and the disclosure of these chemicals, to me it's a red herring. Which basically means it's trying to distract us with something else. They shouldn't be exempt from these things. The federal government should do it. But even if they disclose those things, or even if they're only using baking soda or totally inert ingredients, they're pulling up with this wastewater radioactive elements, barium, uranium, radon, heavy metals, benzene. There's not much more carcinogenic than benzene that's coming up with this waste. So even if they were putting down just baking soda and water, what's coming up is far worse. So even disclosing the chemicals is not going far enough to what needs to be done. And that poses a lot of problems with the processing of this fracking waste. Because what happens is every single truckload of fracking waste is different. Because every company has a different mixture, and every well has a different set of things that are coming up with it. And then you're taking this facility, and one of the primary ways that they start treating this waste is they actually heat it in order to evaporate off excess liquids. Anybody here knows when you put a bunch of chemicals together and start heating it, you start creating chain reactions and chemical reactions that happen. So even if you could figure out what chemicals were going in at the beginning of the process, You have no idea how these things are interacting in this pot through the process itself and coming out the other end. And there's no way to figure that out. And then you have another question. Actually, there's a question over here, and that's like 8 questions.
I'm sorry.
I just want to give other people a chance. Yes, sir.
What is the purpose of introducing chemicals into the fracking process? What function do they serve in this process?
Generally, they're used to help break up rock formations. So they're things that will actually break down rocks so the drills can get through easier, or anti-corrosives that will protect the drill bits and things like that from being corroded by the chemicals or things that are in the rocks.
Are there still actually explosions underground?
Yeah, they actually do the explosions. The explosions happen in the horizontal section of the well once they get down into the shale.
What's the explosive material used to do the explosion? Is it the chemicals or is it...
No, they actually put like charges down there. They actually will feed pipe into there and then feed charges through the pipe and then do explosions along the course of the pipe. And then what they do is they take another mixture of water, sand, and chemicals and force that in. And then what happens is the sand actually goes into the cracks that were created by the explosions and forces the shale open. And then the gas begins to flow out.
Quickly, what's the date again? I'm sorry, on the override for the veto?
There's a legislative session on June 20th in Trenton. We're having a rally down there. We're going to do a march. We're going to have some fun actions down there as well on June 20th. The vote will not officially be posted at all until 48 hours ahead of time. So we won't know for sure until 48 hours ahead of time. But that's why we're getting people in other places to call Speaker Oliver, Senator Sweeney, to make sure they're hearing from people that they need to have this up. Any of you want to call Speaker Oliver and Senator Sweeney, please do that. But please call the Republican legislators here as well. It's very important. Do you have a question?
Yes, it's pretty clear that one of the things you'd like for us to do is to be talking to our neighbors, other people, family members about this. And one of the questions I have is when you talk to people sometimes they'll say, well, I'm a little worried about that, but really we just don't have enough energy and it's so long before we get to the renewable energy sources. So maybe in here, or maybe you can give us some answers to that.
We put a guy on the moon in 10 years when we decided we were going to do it. You know, we're a society of can-do people. And we just don't have a political system right now that's moving in that direction. And it's up to us to shift it. If we took the money that we're investing in oil and gas development and put it into solar and wind development, we could build those technologies out. I have no doubt in my mind that we could make that happen. We took those billions of dollars in investment. Right now, there are proposals that are set to be approved by the Obama administration to explore coastal deposits of oil and gas off of New Jersey's coast. We're paying for that as taxpayers to do research for the gas and oil industry to help them find deposits of oil and gas off the coast of New Jersey, in Delaware, in Virginia. The precautionary principle is being applied in an extreme level, and maybe it should be. I'm not saying it's these windmills off the coast of Atlantic City. The precautionary principle, they are testing those and evaluating the heck out of that project. These guys put in these fracking wells with a signature from some guy from the local zoning board, basically. It's a little bit more than that, but not much. And so, I think that if we apply the same standards and the same investment to renewable energy and things like we would be moving along a lot quicker with the development of solar and wind energy than we are with oil and gas. We're not, that's right, we are not going to the moon anymore. You are correct. And I think Newt Gingrich would bring us back to the moon, right? In the back over there.
2 questions. One, why don't we just reuse the fracking waste since it's already in the location and has...
So they actually do reuse it. That's another part of the question. Is they do recycle the waste in some instances and shove it back down into the wells.
I'm glad to hear that.
So it does. It is something that they do. Not all the wells do that. A lot of it, most of the waste in Pennsylvania, more and more of it is going into recycling, but a lot of it's going into Ohio right now into the injection wells.
My second question, are you guys doing anything at all to sponsor or pass legislation to repeal the Clean Water Act exemption?
We certainly support it and think it's the right thing to do. You know, frankly, at the federal level right now, I don't know if any, there's gridlock like you would not believe. You know, it's just, and so, you know, we have,
That's
you
not
know,
a good answer.
what?
That's not a good enough answer.
Well, I'm telling you what our strategy is and what we're working to do is to move these policies through the states where we actually see that we can win some substantive victories and win standards in place. And we hope that through doing those things that we will actually wind up having some changes that bubble up to the federal level. You know, we are supporting that legislation. We certainly talked to elected officials about it. We sent, you know, action alerts about it. But organizationally, we've decided strategically that we think we can do a lot more on the state level and the local level than we can at the federal level. And that by building at the state and local level on these issues, that will build the political power and political will that's necessary for federal officials to remove those exemptions down the road.
Is there an organization that is sponsoring that?
You know, there's groups who are doing about like similar work that we are in terms of like the emails and things. There's not many organizations that are doing a lot of the organizing we're doing. Like if you look at a lot of the DC-based organizations, they don't have field staff like the Sierra Club does and Clean Water Action does. But you know, a lot of the DC-based organizations really rely on email alerts and things like that, which is essentially what we're doing. And we have lobbyists in DC. But we've decided to really put a lot of our grassroots energy into these state level campaigns. We think that we actually can build political support and win some substantial victories on these issues. In New Jersey, we're also in Pennsylvania and New York, which is relevant to us. One of the biggest things that we have looming over our heads is something that our members of Congress have nothing to do about, and the governors of these states have everything to do about it. It's whether or not the industry is going to put 20,000 fracking wells in the Delaware River Basin. And that proposal was stopped. November will be 2 years when that proposal was stopped at the table. It's still sitting on the table. It was stopped after literally thousands of people were signed up to get on buses from around the region to get onto this. There were literally thousands of phone calls generated in each of these governor's offices, handwritten letters, hundreds of thousands of petitions delivered to these guys' offices on these sorts of things. And so we're, you know, hoping we can build that political power to be able to overcome that. You know, just something too, just to, you know, it's not that it's an excuse, but if you look at the swing states, those, in a lot of the swing states, Colorado, Ohio, Pennsylvania, is where a lot of the gas development goes on in terms of the, you know, presidential elections. So we're hoping that the state level work in those places too will hopefully yield an environment where people running for higher office and President of the United States will take stronger positions against oil and gas development. But, you know, on the whole, this movement, you know, against fracking is really only about 3-4 years old. It's a very new movement in general, which is why we decided to take on these state campaigns and local campaigns rather than trying to tackle this national effort right now with the gridlock and partisanship that's going on in Washington.
There'll be elections which is fall.
Yes.
And are you planning to endorse those candidates?
We do not do endorsements. What we do is make sure that people know where their elected officials stand on those things. And so after this vote happens, we will report back to you about how these legislators voted on that issue. We will do accountability actions in the districts where legislators have failed to pass these things and hold them accountable. And we're not backing off on this issue. We're going to continue to mobilize and push on this. After that election happens, we'll have a new legislature on board, and we're going to work to push it. If we don't wind up overriding the governor's veto, we're going to work to push this through again and build the political power that's necessary to overcome his veto if he's reelected, or potentially have a governor in place who will sign the bill in the first place. But we don't make endorsements. Yes. Yes. For those of you who, when you signed in and gave your email addresses, we'll add you to our email list. And so we're going to be doing call-in days. Actually, next week we're launching a 5-week campaign around June 20th, and then the following week we're going to be doing call-in actions around in these targeted legislative districts. So you'll get hopefully with your database and you can email about that. But at some level, what we'd really like you guys to do is to join us and our volunteers and activists, and join Diane and Quench and her volunteers in going to farmers markets and getting people at those farmers markets to make phone calls into these legislative offices. You making a phone call is really valuable. Spending 2 hours of your time on a Saturday getting 20 other people to make a phone call is even more valuable. And so, you know, we hope that people will take part in that. We're going to have a number of call actions, district actions. We're doing petitioning. We're going to be doing a petition delivery to the district offices and the legislature. So everybody who signed a petition at Dean's, that's going to be part of that. If you haven't signed that petition yet, there's petitions in the back that you can sign on your way out to be a part of that. But really, I hope the message you take away from this is signing your name on a piece of paper is good and important. You should do it. If you can get 10 of your neighbors to do it, if you can get, bring more people in and educate more people on this, that's when we're really going to start changing things. Because when people start getting active like that.
Have they actually done in New Jersey, Carteret, Elizabeth, and Kearney?
The 2 solid waste facilities in Carteret and Kearney were reported by Pennsylvania DEP to take that waste. One of the facilities was cited by New Jersey DEP, not fined, only cited, for issued a violation for accepting radioactive waste without a permit. And then that waste was shipped out of the state within 2011. Yes, and since this effort has been in the legislature, the waste has stopped coming to the state. I honestly think that what's happened is that the industry saw this was happening and didn't want to create a political dynamic where they're continuing to bring this stuff in and creating active targets for us. So they can say, oh, we're just taking it to Ohio now. We don't need to do this. I'll tell you, the industry would be fighting is it's hard to stop this legislation. They weren't planning on making New Jersey dumping ground for stuff.
Why is the governor concerned? What's the motivation?
He said it's not New Jersey's business. It's the federal government's business.
Is that why he did the retail?
That's what he basically said. It's the federal government's job. It's not the business job. The real reason, what do I really think? What do I really think? I think that at a very basic level, that power comes from 2 places in our political system. It comes from money, and it comes from people. And our opposition has a lot of money and a very small number of people. And we have some people, we're going to get more people, a lot of people, and a little bit of money. And it's basically how you can organize those resources to effectively influence politicians to press this button or this button at the end of the day. And when we lose campaigns, and I've lost them, it happens, to me, that is really bad that we haven't banned fracking because we don't plan on doing it. But through the course of that campaign, we build political infrastructure that we can carry on to the next campaign, that we can continue to build upon, so that we can have the power and influence in the oil and gas industry does, so that we can take our country back from these guys who literally have taken us and advantage of us. We have to pick something. Alright, so we're going to pick out, everybody got your raffle tickets.